So our first speaker is Daniella Lock, who is a lecturer in law at King's College and helped coordinate a brilliant letter that went from a good number of notable lawyers and people working in the legal profession about the events of last Saturday. So please welcome Daniella to the platform.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to PSC for organising such an important event at this crucial time. So, yes, I'm one of the legal scholars who signed the letter to the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London calling for an urgent investigation into last weekend's events, as well as for urgent repeal of the protest law, which I'm going to speak to you about today, and which shows that last weekend was not an isolated attack on protest rights. It was part of a broader and sustained attack on protest rights, which has been brought about by recent law reform, which has created a hostile environment for protesters and which has ensured that increasingly protest is being seen as a risk rather than a right. This law is also being used in a way which is having a disproportionate effect on those Palestinian solidarity groups as well as environmental protesters. And so in this way, the law is clearly being used politically. And this is not compatible with the right to protest. So before I discuss these legal changes, I just want to set out what the legal right to protest actually is. So the right to protest, which was established in law as part of a broad agreement between European states that the right to protest is part of a minimal set of rights which are essential for democracies to survive. So this agreement was made as part of an agreement to prevent fascism from spreading again throughout Europe. And it says that we all have the right to protest as part of our right to freedom of expression and our right to freedom of assembly. This right is not an opt-in right. States can't decide when they want to protect the right to protest. They're not allowed to use it selectively. So a state is not allowed to decide to not protect the right to protest just because it disagrees with the political content of those who are protesting. So we have the right to protest. Basically, the way it exists is that for states to interfere with the right to protest, this has to be necessary for the public good, for public order, national security, etc. But crucially, any interference with the right to protest must be proportionate. So the state must be using the minimum interference necessary in order to protect this public good. And it's clear that the recent legal reform that has been passed by the last government but which has been upheld by the current government with the human rights lawyer living in number 10, this law reform is not compatible with the law with the right to protest being protected. So what is this law reform? So we have primary legislation. We have the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022, which you will probably all have heard of, and which essentially allows the police to intervene where protests are noisy or are causing forms of disruption. This is not compatible with the right to protest. Protest is recognized in the case law that where protests are supposed to cause disruption, that's how they function, and that noise is perfectly compatible with this disruption. And it's perfectly compatible with the protest being peaceful. So the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, not compatible with the right to protest, it seems, from the outside. Then we have the Public Order Act, which Rishi Sunak was open about the fact that had been the product of lobbying by Policy Exchange, which is an oil company-funded right-wing think tank that you might have heard of. And so the Public Order Act basically created a whole load of new offences related to protests and increase the criminal sentences that can be imposed on protesters to up to 10 years. So it's a hugely, again, disproportionate response to issues with protests at the moment. Great, thank you. And then finally we have some public order regulations that have been passed, which the courts have recently found to be unlawful. This has been This has been basically upheld by Keir Starmer, and the courts, despite having found this to be incompatible with the right to protest, Keir Starmer is pushing ahead and trying to defend these regulations in court. Okay, so what's the evidence that this law, which is already on the face of it incompatible with the right to protest, is being used politically? We've seen the escalation of aggression against protesters and the mass arrests. I think we're also seeing the privatization of responsibility to keep protests peaceful. So police are basically holding all protesters responsible for the conduct of protesters as a whole. And we're also seeing terrorism measures against protesters, which is particularly incompatible with the right to protest. So, yeah, we've got this law reform which is being used in a political way, and this seems to be part of a broader attack on basic democratic freedoms, as seen by the attacks that we've seen on election laws, the increasing national security powers, and in this way, yeah, I'm very happy to sign this letter and call for immediate law reform and an urgent investigation into what's just happened. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Daniella.